So those were just a few little examples of service that the youth have done. And obviously today will be another example in their lives. And I wonder if any of you can relate to this idea that there are Bible verses that we hear that we just really like. And sometimes they're not ones that we've necessarily been really transformed by, but we hear them and we think, oh, I like that verse. We like maybe an idea about it. We like how it sounds. And for me, one of those Bible verses is Joshua 24:15. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. And I've always liked how that verse sounds. I actually have it. There's a picture in our kitchen, and it's written on the gate. It's a picture of a house, and on the gate going into the garden is that verse. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. And I've always loved that it was written on the gate, because it feels like it's a declaration of that space, that as you go into that household, it is a place where the Lord is served. But it was only last year that I suddenly thought about that verse, and I said to myself, and excuse me, I am an English teacher, I thought, that's a but as phrase. It's a conjunctive phrase. It's a connecting idea. It means it has led on from something. And I couldn't recall off the top of my head if I even have ever known what it leads on from. And so it drew me to Joshua 24 to find out the context of that verse. And, but also is a turning point kind of word. It signals moving on from one idea to the next. And so I had a look at it. And the context of Joshua 24 is that they are renewing their covenant before the Lord. They have come into the promised land. They are no longer at war. They are going into a time of being settled. And so the beginning of chapter 24, Joshua is reminding them of all the things the Lord has done for them. He is reminding them that the Lord has brought them out of Egypt. He's reminding them all the way back to Abraham, where he's giving him sons and promises. And I wonder how often I sit down, or we sit down, and we think about all the things the Lord has done for us, and whether if we did that more often, we would live with more grateful hearts, because Jesus doesn't just stop at salvation. He continues to do things and serve us. So the Israelites, so the verse actually reads, and I'm going to read 14, Joshua 24, 14 and 15. It reads, "Now fear the Lord and serve him with all faithfulness. Throw away the gods your ancestors worshipped beyond the river Euphrates and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourself this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." And when I read that verse in context, I realized that Joshua is really challenging them. He is challenging them with, then choose for yourselves this day, the beginning of verse 15, whom will you serve? And then he lists some gods that have had influence on the Israelites' lives to this point. And I don't think in our modern age that it's the gods, that we have the same problem with gods. But we have metaphorical gods that are the things that we choose to serve with our daily lives. So in our modern world, and I'm thinking about the youth here, something we might choose to serve every day is our social media. We will choose to go there over and over again. We might choose Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat, but there will be something in social media we're serving. Older generations, it might not be social media, it might be TV programming if it's media-based. I said this to David last night and it made him laugh, but I do wonder how many members of our congregation have said something along the lines of, "Oh, I can't go to that family gathering, the football is on." But we choose to serve something outside of the Lord. It might also be music. Sometimes our music choices, we're choosing to serve something other than the Lord. But even if it's not media that we struggle with, and remember the eyes are a lamp to the body, you know, what we consume with our eyes affects the whole body. We might live struggling to serve societal expectations of what our lives should look like. So they can look like lots of different things, but some that I thought of, you know, I think one, especially for people in my generation, could be particularly having to have a lot of expendable income. The idea that you have money and you always are able to afford everything. I think that, you know, sometimes we think the amount of income that we have indicates our worth. I think our culture, especially a Western culture, really prizes independence and not having to rely on others. And I can tell you, I'm moving house soon and I will be sending lots of messages for help. But I think, you know, we can also be caught up in societal expectations of how our family should look or what our lives should look like. You know, we should have a certain amount of people in our circle, but that's not what God is necessarily calling us to. When I'm personally struggling with the expectations of what to serve in this life, I often think about that verse in Philippians 4:11-12, where Paul talks about, I've learned to be content whatever my circumstances, whether I have a lot or a little. And I think, you know, if I come back to, okay, so if we can start to lay down the expectations of the world of how our lives should look, then and pick up that desire to serve the Lord, it comes with that contentment of not struggling or striving so much to meet those expectations. And you know, I was thinking about what does it look like to serve the Lord, and it looks like lots of different things. And I think we can often think, you know, the youth are serving the Lord today, and that's really amazing. But it's not just being at the front of church. Plenty of people serve the Lord and every day, and they're not at the front of church. I think the first way we serve the Lord is with our mind and with our thoughts, and it's about filling them up with his word, and it's about spending time meditating on his word day and night. I think another way we serve the Lord is with our resources, and that doesn't necessarily always mean our money, but it means our time. It's a really precious thing to us, our time, and so using it for him is a great way to serve him. It might be our money, but it also might be places like our home. You know, our home should be a place where the Lord's presence is really evident. And when people come in, we want them to feel his presence. We serve him in church, but we should be serving him outside of church as well, in whatever skills and talents that he has given us. It should pervade every aspect of our lives. But, you know, if we think about, so we want to choose to serve him, why should we do it? And I think the first thing we need to go back to is why the Israelites did it. They did it in response. They did it in response to all that he had already done for them. The Lord starts, as I said earlier, the Lord starts by saving us. He starts by freeing us from our sin and giving us his redemption. But he doesn't stop there. He continues to serve us and work in our lives. And so service partly comes out of an acknowledgement of all that he has already done. The second reason, and the reason that really always stays in my mind, the reason I love to serve the Lord is very simple. It's because it's really good to serve the Lord. Personally, I do it for the belly-aching laughs that you get serving the Lord. I mean those kind of really deep, soul-healing, tears running down your face, you can't breathe sort of laughs. I feel like my time serving the Lord in whatever capacity has brought me so many of that type of laugh. I think about the amount of times the young people in the front row have made me laugh like that. And they don't come every day, but when they come, those laughs are just really amazing to experience. And there's something really special about being amongst God's people and serving him together, that you get that blessing of that kind of laughter. You know, when I was thinking about this idea a few months ago, I remembered the next day I said, Lord, like, I want to serve you and I want to be paying attention today. so help me pay attention to where I can serve you. And that looked in that day, it wasn't big things. It looked like going to the library with Sophia, and we were going to pick some books, and I hadn't really planned to stay there very long, but there was this lovely couple with their young boy, and they were speaking. They weren't really speaking to me, but they were encouraging their child to interact with Sophia. And I could have just said, oh, do you know what, I'm busy, I'm just going to go. But I could see that they just really liked the idea of the children interacting. So I put down my stuff and I sat down and I just said, you know what, there's nowhere that I need to be today. Let's just wait and let them have that moment of enjoyment. And I think the Lord would have gone further and he would have maybe struck up a bit of a relationship. But that's where I was like, oh, it feels a bit too much. And maybe next time if I saw them again, I would push. I'd be like, okay, let's start asking questions. And then later on that day, I was at the shop. And I'm often shopping with Sophia. And I normally do like a big weekly shop. And so it takes a while. We shop at Lidl. It takes a while to get it all out the trolley. And so if people are lining up behind me and they've only got a few items, I'm always like, oh, please go ahead, because I don't want them to have to wait around, because then I have to also put it all back in, and it just takes a while, and I feel a bit stressed about it. But there was this young girl, and I would say she was maybe less than 10 years old, and she was holding a giant watermelon, and she was all by herself. And I said to her, I was like, and there was two people, I said to both of them, oh, please go in front. And the first person went and they paid. And by that point, I'd unloaded everything. And then this little girl went to pay. And the guy said to her, oh, it's £2.36. And she, bless her, she said, oh, but I only have £1. I thought it said 53p. But it said 53p per kilo. And it was a big watermelon. And so it was more than £1. And I knew instantly in that moment that I needed to pay for it for her, because what is £2.36 for a little girl to take a watermelon? She could have been taking a croissant, but she chose a giant watermelon, and I don't know what made her want the watermelon. Maybe she had been asked to get the watermelon, but I just knew in that moment that was the way that I needed to serve the Lord in that moment. And you know, the last thing that I would say that I think about why do we serve the Lord? I would always say that Jesus is a servant king, and he sets the example for us for service. And I came across this actually in my Bible reading this morning. You know, he talks about it. I'm going to try and find it without dropping stuff. It says in Matthew 6:20. That's the wrong one. I wrote it down. I forgot. Sorry, it's Mark. It's Mark 10:45. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as ransom for many. And so he sets that as our example. That service is our example. He is the example for service. And you know, there are plenty of ways that Jesus serves people in the Bible. The one that comes to mind the most quickly for me is when he washes the disciples' feet, because it's so countercultural for him to do that, to choose to be the one to wash their feet. But something that I never really acknowledged until a little while ago is that it's not just about Jesus being the servant king that I truly love about service, and why it's so fundamentally important to my faith. It's because serving the Lord brings us to a place of intimacy with him. We don't serve by ourselves. When we do things for the Lord, he never leaves us to do it independently. We are dependent on him. We are in relationship with him. And so when I'm serving the Lord, I feel him close by. And it's actually that intimacy, that closeness to God, that nearness to him, that his spirit and his presence is here. That is what is so important about service to my faith. And that's why, I long to serve him in our household. I want his presence to be in every part of our household, and to infuse every molecule of my being and of my family's being. And And, that is, when I approached Nathan, I said, I think the youth are in a place that they're ready to do a youth service. That was my prayer for them, that in serving the Lord, they will come closer to him and they will understand more of his heart and who he is. That is my prayer for all of you today, that as you are served by the youth, that you draw closer to him and you understand more of what his heart is for you and for the world. Practically, it would be great if anyone feels touched and wants to be a youth leader. No, I'm joking. There are always opportunities to serve. And me and David and some other people absolutely just love our youth. And I just know that it would be great to have another female leader as well. So something to be praying about. I think one of the things that is just so beautiful about seeing young people serve is that you start to see the outpouring of their faith. And that is what we long to see in our youth group.